And that's going to start us off in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. We're going to get to that in just a moment. The title of the message is The I Investment. I've been saying to you right along as I've been encouraging you to give to the roofing and van campaign that this is not about money. And I'm sure there are people that are sitting out there, though they're being kind about it, and under their voice, not saying it out loud, saying, yeah, well, it's not about money. How come you're taking offerings of it? It's not about money. Well, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I want you to know that it is about money in one sense of the word, but when all that's stripped away, it's never about money. It's never about money. Money's just a thing. And though it's a powerful thing, and there's a lot of things that money says about our own life, probably more than any singular thing, money says things about our own life. It can say that God can't trust us very much, so He doesn't give us very much, and that would make the rich that we would look around, people that have money, and saying, well, they're really blessed of God because they do take care of it. And that may be the case. But there are also people that are very faithful to God, loyal to God, manage things very well, barely can keep their head above water, and we might consider them as poor, and they're right smack dab in the will of God. God has different plans for different people. Now, I want to put this in perspective with a little thing that I found that I used a long time ago, and I don't even remember when I used it, but it's good. It's not meant to be funny. It's very serious. Isn't it funny how a $10 bill looks so big when you take it to worship, but so small when you take it to the supermarket? Now, think about that. Funny how long an hour spent in worship, but how short it is when golfing or fishing or attending a ball game. You see what I'm doing? I'm making a contrast between the secular and the sacred. There should never be a division of that, but I'm making a contrast. Funny how we applaud when the ball game goes into overtime, but we complain if the worship hour is over the regular time. Funny how laborious it is to read a chapter in the Bible, but how easy it is to read a 300-page novel. Funny how people scramble to get a front seat at the ball game, but they scramble to get a back seat at the services. And I'm not going to make too big a deal about that. Thank you for keeping Sadie back there in the Sadie Cove and the Ella Cove. And there's reasons. Little kids, that's a good place for them to be. It is. You never know when they might run up to the front. Listen, that's not a distraction to me. That just adds to the service as far as I'm concerned. These days are going to be gone real quick. We're going to look at those precious little kids, and they're growing up before our very eyes. Let's enjoy them while we got them. And then funny that parents are so concerned about school lessons, but so completely unconcerned about Bible lessons. Now, you're getting the idea. And I have no question in my mind, I wanted to start this message tonight with that contrast, because we're really dealing with what is spiritual and what is not spiritual. How Satan enters into this picture and causes us to see a $10 bill a whole lot differently under certain circumstances than he does other under circumstances. Now, once again, I'm not scolding anybody when I say this, but maybe we haven't yet reached our $40,000 goal, because that's what you did. You looked at $1,000 and you said, whoa, that's a lot of money. Man, that would buy a lot of things. I got a vacation coming up, and we're saving for next year, and that $1,000 looks mighty big, but when you go out to something else, it doesn't seem that big. It happens all the time. Look, it happens to me. It happens to you. We had a great Sunday school lesson this morning, and I love it when Sam is transparent like that and shares with us. He was talking about how chastisement of God, how God can chastise you through your finances. Did you know that? I relate with that very well. God has chastised me many times in my finances, because He knows He can get my attention in that way. Well, the scripture that I'm going to start off with is really going to put this all in perspective. And what I want you to be thinking about before we get into this I investment message, because it'll be pretty plain, is I want you to look at these few verses that I'm going to be reading to you now, and I want you to measure yourself. Would you say that you are a person here on this Sunday night crowd where the most dedicated of your people come? Would you say that you're a person who is very intentionally laying up treasures in heaven, and I'll explain how you do that, or treasures on earth? I wonder if there's anybody in here that's got themselves so deep in debt that you can't take part in an offering like we've been talking about. You just can't do it, because you've obligated yourself into so many ways, it's not even feasible. I've had people say that to me. Do you think that when there's an offering being taken and you really don't have the money, should I take from Peter to rob Paul, or however that saying goes, and what should I do? Well, I say tithe anyhow, because the bottom line is very simple. You've let yourself get in overhead probably in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to be addressing that in just a moment. So let's read the scripture. Matthew 6, beginning in verse 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. What's valuable to you, you will fix your entire being on that. Now, there's 4 simple points. I'm hoping to get through all of this. There's a good bit of material, but it's all good stuff. And the first thing, all of these begin with I. We're going to look at the I of importance. The I of importance. And after we have dealt with that, got these pages sticking together, which is unusual for me. Then we're going to look at the I of indictment. And that's where the crux of this message is at. The I of indictment. Some of us are living under an indictment. You need to think about that. And you will when we get into it. And then we're going to finally finish this all up tonight by looking at the I of involvement, and that will be self-explanatory toward you. And so let's start looking at the I of importance and see what that's really all about. Now turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and we're going to read to you verses 2 through 5, because especially in verse 5, this is going to point out exactly what this message is all about. You may think in Bible Baptist Church there have been people that have come here, and I especially like Matt and Jeannie when they talk about how they didn't come to our church for a long time, even though they wanted to get in church, and Matt really wasn't saved yet. At least I think that's how the case was with them. And they looked at the white hill up on the white church up on the hill, and they thought, I'd really like to go there, but people like us wouldn't fit there. Only highfalutin people go to that church. That's his testimony. I loved it when we were in discipleship with each other and we were talking. He was bringing stuff like this out and giving me his testimony. And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, man, how wrong I was. That's not how Bible Baptist Church is at all. It's not the church up on the hill where only wealthy people go. I mean, anybody in here wealthy? It's the church up on the hill where there's people that are real people go to church. Just as there are real people that go to First Baptist Church and real people that go to Central Baptist Church and real people that... You could go on and on and on with the churches. And so let's look at this, because here's what we're after. I'm going to remind you of the widow's mite. You remember that offering that was taken in the Bible where Jesus sat beside the temple, the treasury of the temple, and there were the wealthy people that were in the temple. They were waving their offering about, wanted everybody to know how much they give, bragging about how much they give. And Jesus watched them do that, and they put it in the offering with big pomp and ceremony. And then there's a little widow who had hardly anything at all, and she takes her 2 mites up and she puts it in. Nobody even notices it except Jesus. And then he looks at his disciples and said, she gave more than all of them put together. You know what that tells me? It ain't about money. It ain't about money. Never has been, never will be. Here's what it's about. Starting verse 2, 2 Corinthians chapter 8. How that in great trial of affliction the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. He's talking about this church here at Corinth giving a great offering. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves. They were willing of themselves. Verse 4, praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. Now here it is. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord, and unto us by the will of God. He's talking about an offering here. We could get into the details of that offering, but he really puts it in perspective. Before anybody gave any money, they said, here, Lord, is me. It is I. And I want you to take me as an offering. I'm giving myself to you. And out of that, they gave their money. Now, it's very important that we're letting God deal with our hearts, and so I want you to stop and think for a moment and absorb what I've talked about already, and mostly what the Scripture said. Have you given that way? I want you to really stop and think. When it comes time for a tithe or time for an offering or whatever it may be in that regard, do you sit down, plan it out, and do you look at each other, you and your wife, or you by yourself, or however it may be, and you look and you say, Lord, I love you, and I've given myself to you, and I want you to receive this offering that I'm going to give through your church, the body of Jesus Christ, and I'm giving that to you through them as an expression that I have, first of all, given myself to you. So the question is very simple. Have you indeed given yourself to the Lord? I'm not asking you if you're saved. I suppose what I'm really talking about is lordship, salvation. Have you really carried that out, and have you really given yourself to your God? Well, that'll come out in a whole lot of ways. Now, there's only 2 sub-points, and I'm going to get this going because I've got something I got to do on Wednesday, and I'll be here preaching, but the message I want to finish up from the previous Wednesday. The instead factor. Some people offer a cheap substitute to God. They offer money. Let me say that again. Some people in their worship offer a cheap substitute for God. They give money. Now, I want to make this very clear. Giving money can cause our consciences to be soothed in many different ways. But it's not about giving money, it's about giving ourselves. That's it. You're never going to stand before your God and say to Him, but look how much I gave. Now, I don't know exactly how much anybody gives in this church. But I'm going to tell you, after all these years, I know who gives and probably know to some degree who doesn't give. I'm going to say to Danny and Sue, because they're probably the only ones for sure in this church that know who does give and who doesn't. And one of the things that I love about them being in charge of the money of this church, as far as distributing and letting us know how it's going and so on and so forth, they don't make any differentiation between those who don't tithe and those who tithe. I don't think you've ever come to me in 33 years and said, there's people in this church that don't tithe and here's who they are. You've never done that as far as I know. Good. Thank you. Amen. We ought to all say amen to that. Listen, that's powerful stuff. That ought to give confidence to you. Because we know what this is really all about. And so Paul praises this church because the people gave themselves before they gave their money. Now, I want to look at the intent of this also. Now listen to this next phrase. It'll be on the screen. God doesn't really want or need your money. God doesn't really want or need your money. The giving is not for God. It's for you. I want you to stop and think about that. The giving is not for God. It's for you and for me. That's really important because it's in a tangible way that you and I have of acknowledging our God and His sovereignty over our lives. Do you know what's happening when we put our tithes and offerings into the offering plate when it comes around? Here's what we're saying, whether you realize it or not. We're looking at God and we're seeing that He has blessed our lives. And He has done that. We could have a testimony meeting here tonight and all you'd have to do is just start speaking up. Because we've all been so blessed by God, and especially when there's tragedies, just as what Jeremy preached on this morning, and I looked over and saw Charles sitting there. Charles has lost a daughter. I can't think of many things that are much worse than that. We had 2 families sitting right here in the center, one who's just gone through a tremendous loss, Tim, who was killed in this accident, just turning in to go to work that day, right there in sight of the factory that he was working in and part owner in, I guess. And there they were, terrible tragedies. And this is a tangible way. We say, Lord, the house I have, the car I have, the bank account I have, the clothes that I have, the children that I have, the wife that I have, the church that I have, that list goes on and on and on. That all comes from you. And my giving back to you is an acknowledgement of your sovereignty in my life. Now, I'm not going to give you this answer, but I am going to say this to you. If my giving is an acknowledgement of God's sovereignty in my life, what is it saying when I don't give? Would you think about that? if I'm not giving, what does that say about me and my relationship to my God and His sovereignty over my life? Somebody's going to be your God. And let me give you a hint. If you're coming before God and not acknowledging His sovereignty, you are looking at yourself as sovereign. You are your own God. And the proof is your stinginess and your selfishness. You see, the goal of all giving is to acknowledge His lordship and to turn your life and your will completely over to Him. And so the true test of giving is not how much you give, but how you give. There are precious things that money just cannot buy. We've just had great examples of that. Now we're going to get into the second point here, the eye of indictment, and I want you to stick with me on this because there's some really good things in here that can really help us grow in various ways. You and I live in a materialistic culture. When I say that we live in a materialistic culture, somebody put it this way. They said the temptations of that destructive pathology, that materialistic culture, are rampant in our culture today. See, the question is simply going to be this. Are you a materialistic person? See, I believe that cripples churches. It cripples a nation. It cripples anybody. Because materialism, by its own nature, cannot build up. Not the things that we're talking about. And I'm bringing that to your attention because it applies to believers. And listen to me, materialism is what cripples the lives of believers. Materialism cripples the lives of believers. Now, I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about this. What are the signs of materialism? I can look around here. I know what kind of cars most of you drive. We got a Cadillac that's out there in the parking lot, and I know a lot of Ford products and Chevrolet products and Toyota products, and I don't mean to be missing any, but there's different ones that are out. We got a Lexus that's out there. And so, is that what a materialistic person is? Can we go out in the parking lot and say, yeah, well, I see who the materialistic ones are? No. How about looking at their house? We have people in our church, we got them from all different spectrums. There are people that live in really nice houses right here in our church. They have some really nice houses. And then there are people that have some very humble homes. There are people that rent apartments. And we could go on and on and on about the kind of house. Is that what determines whether a person is materialistic or not? Can you go look at their house and say, that's a materialistic person? Well, how about if we were to look at their wardrobe? A fancy wardrobe. Do you know what kind of suit I got on right now? I'm going to impress you. This is a Joseph A. Bank suit that I have on. Our illustrious associate pastor made me aware of some great deals there. And I wear this suit. And it's supposed to be a very expensive suit, but I got a J.C. Penney suit at home that I like a lot better than I do this suit. Paid about half as much for it. Okay, am I a materialistic person because I have gone to Joseph A. Bank and bought suits and shirts and ties because there's cheaper places to go? How about jewelry? We have an entire religion that's built around that, and we could look around and say, I remember what you paid for this ring on our 25th anniversary. I won't tell anybody, but it's a nice ring. My wife has on an anniversary ring from our 25th anniversary that I paid on for a couple of years before I finally got it and wanted to get her the best that I could get her. Does that mean we're materialistic? Because that money could have gone into missions. Could have. How about you? Wonder who's got the most expensive jewelry on right here tonight. Wonder how many guys, when they asked their girl to marry them to become their wife, they bought this gigantic rock that cost them thousands and thousands and thousands. That's materialistic, isn't it? Now listen to me. Those are not signs of materialism. Money is not the root of all evil. What is the root of all evil? The love of it. It isn't matter the house you live in. Do you love that house above Jesus Christ? It doesn't matter if it's a car. You can love it above Jesus Christ. Then it's materialism. The God of materialism. Listen, I know what I'm talking about because I've had gods in my life. The love of it. The love of money. Loving it is different than having it. I want to say that again. Loving it is different than having it. You can have it and not love it, and you can not have it and love it. Did you get that? You don't necessarily have to have a lot of riches in order to be materialistic. It all depends on your heart. You know, I could look at Dell. I really like Dell's house. I love sitting out on that porch, and you look out, and it's just beautiful out there. And I could commit the God of materialism and say, why can't I have a house like Dell has? Or we can look at anybody else with anything else in their life, and all of a sudden you want it yourself, and you've made a God out of it, even though you don't have it. Now, I want us to take a little bit of an inventory. There's just 4 things here, and I'm going to work hard to get through these. And I want you to see through this inventory if you're affected or consumed by materialism by looking at attitudes. Attitudes. I originally started off with 7, and I boiled these down. Actually, I combined a couple of them together because they just fit so well together. Now, here's what they are. I'm going to read them to you before I get to each one and let you at least see where I'm going with all of this. Number 1, you can have an attitude of irritation or anxiety over the money or lack of it in your life. The things or the lack of things in your life. Number 2, we're going to be looking at selfishness, the I factor. The selfishness that's in our life can truly point out the terrible God of materialism in our life. And then we're going to be looking at the insatiability, and really what I'm dealing with here is a couple of things, but we're going to put it under the head of greediness. Are you a greedy person? Think about that. And then number 4, there's another major problem, and that is idolatry. That's what materialism is really all about. Let's get into this. Here's what I mean when I say an anxiety or an irritation when it comes to the money in your life. You no longer just manage your money. You worry about it all the time. And you think about it all of the time. I wish it's one of those testimonies that it would have been awesome for everybody in our church to be able to hear that Sam gave to us this morning in his Sunday school class. It really impacted me. I love his transparency. No, not a phony bone in his body. And he shared with us this morning some dynamite stuff about materialism and not having materialism in your life. And I want to tell you right now that this anxiety, this irritation that can come in your life, it isn't that you no longer budget your money. You take care of the great details of your money, but you're fretting over it. It's just on your mind all the time. And you fret over the money in your life. You're concerned about it. You're worried about it. You discuss it. You argue about it. You get mad about it. You get in arguments with your wife about it. What it usually means, now listen, because this is where the rubber meets the road for you and I. What it usually means is you're responsible, you're irresponsible, and you're spending more than you can earn. You're irresponsible and you're spending more than you earn. Now let's put this in perspective right now, because you may have found something that can really help you. Well, if I could just make more money, then I could pay for these things. That's not the problem. Now think with me. Has God provided for you what you have in your life? Has He provided for you? Do you understand what lies at the base of materialism? You're complaining against God. You haven't given me enough. You gave Dell that nice house. How come you don't give me a nice house like that? We're complaining about what God has given to us. Put that on a lesser scale. Have you ever had someone that you would give something to, and you would give it to them, maybe the same kind of a gift at Christmas time, and all of a sudden they're not appreciative anymore? You ought to be giving them more. I mean, I could have looked at what you gave to us in the Pastor Appreciation Day, and what if it had been less? I mean, maybe in the past it has been. I don't really remember. I don't mean to sound ungrateful or anything, but my wife has a lot of control in those things in my life. And when she gets all shook up about something, I get shook up. And when she's awed by something, I'm awed by it. I'm driving down the road and she says, wow! She said, what? Don, look at this. See, here's what lies at the base of this. It's discontentment. And here's the problem with discontentment. It doesn't go away. It really isn't a matter. If one day I could just have Dell's house, the discontentment would go away. No, it wouldn't. Then I'd look at Albert Payne's house and I'd say, I'd like to have a house like Albert Payne's. And so I get a house like Albert Payne's, and then I'm going to look at Danny Ford and I'm going to say, I want a house like Danny Ford. And you see the problem? It just goes on and on. You know why? Because it's not just a name. It's not just materialism. It is a God that's in your life, and it can't be sustained. Listen to me, folks. I know what I'm talking about. I've been there and done that. I'm ashamed to tell you that. See, our culture is built on credit. I feel really good about a wedding that we've got coming up. Katie and Derek, I've been counseling with them and each week, and we've been going over various things. And one of the things we go over is a budget, how to have a budget. Daryl Sparks is the one who put this together. It's absolutely excellent. And I have them put down what their bills are and what their income is. And believe me, a lot of people going into marriage, they've already got the problem. They got a lot of bills and very little income. And creditors apparently are out there saying, hey, that's okay, we don't care. You just pay us just a little bit at a time. They want to make a lot of money off of you, I suppose. We have an entire culture that's built on credit. And so the majority of people in America spend more than they earn. Now, I want you to stop and think about that for yourself. Are you right now spending more than you earn? You don't want to say it out loud. Don't need to come tell me. There's plenty of people in this church that can help you in that. I could call them out by name. If you come to me, I'll try to hook you up with them. That's a major problem, and that's not their problem. I said to them, do you have any credit cards? Because one of the things I advise is get rid of the credit cards. Get a debit card, something that you have to pay off every single month. Credit cards have ruined all kinds of lives. Sam will give you all kind of testimony about that, and probably Danny too, and the business that they're in and how that has ruined so many lives. And so it's very important that we have an understanding that you're going to worry about money. That's materialism. Sometimes you can't help it because you see the terrible problem that's happening. You become preoccupied with all of this. And no wonder. You've developed a materialistic mindset. And so this irritation is manifest in a lot of ways, and discontentment is one of them. But here's what discontentment really is at its root. It's losing appreciation for what you have. I was very intentionally talking about Dell's house and Albert's house and Danny's house, and I could have pointed out Frosty back here. He lives in a dynamite place. I mean, in summertime, all the trees that are around his house and this creek that you can hear, man, I'd stay out on that outside there forever and ever and ever. Just absolutely gorgeous. And here we are, we're talking about these things and we're looking at these things, but the bottom line's really pretty simple. God has given me what God wants to give me. And I need to be content with what God has given to me. Now, let me ask you, because that might be your invitation right here. Lord, I need to say to you right now, because you've spoken to me about this, I don't want this monster, this God of materialism in my life anymore. I want contentment in my life. And that comes with appreciating what you've already given to me. Bottom line is, in this country that we live in, all advertising, what lies at the base of advertising? They make you want it. Don and I get these things. We've been paying things off as we've been going along. Looks like we're going to be right on target. And boy, I want to tell you, the creditors, they know about that. You pay a bill off and they'll flood you. You need this credit card. I know you just paid it off, but let us give you a better one now. It's got a higher credit limit. And you won't be charged if there's any late fees. We'll never charge you any late fees. Let us just give you this card. You're going to love this card. Or a bigger, better car. Bigger, better house. You know how that works. We got all kinds of things around us that are giving those things to us. But mark it down. Discontentment, what lies at the base of it is you do not appreciate what God has given to you. It's an insult to God. Now, the second thing that plays a large part in this is selfishness. The attitude of materialism incorporates the concept of selfishness. Simply defined, it's put this way. Listen to me carefully, because I've put a lot of labor into this to put these in little sentences that will strike home with you, and this is one of them. Be on the screen behind me. How in the world do you define selfishness in your life? There's a number of ways, but there's one major way I want to bring to your attention. You have no joy in giving. You have no joy in giving. You're going to be really glad when this is over. If we make it, fine, but it's not because of you that we're going to make it. You just want to get it over because you don't much like the way God's dealing with you about this. I mean, after all is said and done, I can be a dedicated Christian, can't I? And not give to this fund, this campaign that you've got going to put a roof on and a van paying it off. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'm not a committed Christian, does it? Satan doesn't care how it's done. He just wants to make you get away from all of this and not recognize the lordship of God in your life. If someone wants to use what you have, sorry, and you get upset about it. Someone comes to you and presents a need and tells you about the need, and you're angry about the fact that you think that you're obligated to give to the need. You write that check out to the church, but you look at it and $100, man, that's a lot of money to give to a church. They don't really need that much. I'll write it out for $75. Goes back to the introduction, how big a $10 bill can look. That's a dead giveaway that you're a selfish person. At heart, you're a selfish person, which is an element of materialism. Now, I'm trying to caution you not to cop out on this and say, but I give to my kids. I got a kid in college. Man, it's costing me an arm and a leg. Just about everybody in this room has tried hard to get their kids through college. I remember those days. There wasn't much left. And we have other things, don't we? Almost everybody in here has got a car payment that's due every single month. A house payment that's due every single month. Oh, you know how that goes. On and on that list goes. And you use that as an excuse when the truth of the matter is, just look a little deeper. You don't have any joy in giving. And the evidence is in your life. You do very little of it. And it's usually family when you do it. Now let's look at this matter of greed, insatiability. It's a characteristic of the materialist that envies what others have. That invariably, he wants what he doesn't have. He lusts for something that somebody else has. He wants their lifestyle. He wants their clothes, their car, their house, whatever else they have. He's not content with his own situation. There's something pushing him for new and something that's different. And he becomes tired of something very rapidly. The new smell of the car is gone. If only I could get that back. That's covetousness. That's desiring what someone else has. We have a generation of children that are growing up who have very difficult time being entertained by anything for more than 5 or 10 minutes. We got a lot of kids that don't like the outdoors. One of the things I love about Gary and Robin is that their kids get outdoors a lot. And we got kids that are glued in front of a TV and they're playing. And I'm not against the games. I don't play the games, but I'm not against the games, I don't think. They're learning, these kids are learning to constantly demand something new. That's covetousness. Yeah, but they got an iPhone. I mean, they're younger than me and they got an iPhone. And all the kids in school have iPhones. I don't fit in. They laugh at me. In fact, when I got to make a phone call, I sneak off to the side because I don't want them to see what a lousy phone I got. Is my phone here? Do you have it? My phone is so bad that the paint is peeling off my phone. Show my phone. Just hold it up there, would you? You don't want to do that, do you? Okay. It's peeling off. Her phone is so bad that all it does anymore is take pictures. She puts it in her purse and there's flashes going off in her purse. If she were to turn it on in here, it would start taking pictures of the ceiling or wherever it's pointed. It just flashes all the time. Now you're looking at me and saying, yeah, well, how about putting a point in there? Cheap. You ought to get a different kind of phone. Well, I will as soon as my contract is up in 2 months. Listen, greediness manifests itself in a whole lot of ways in our life. Wanting more is obviously the basic definition, and in that sense, it's like covetousness. But greediness is different than coveting. Coveting is wanting what somebody else has. Greed is wanting what you don't have. And you can have both those things going on at the same time in your life. It feeds on a number of things. Get rich quick. That's why we play the lotteries. We're out there just convinced, God's got to be in that. Maybe even pray before we buy our lottery tickets. And Lord, please bless this, and I promise I'll pay the church off. They won't have to run any more campaigns on putting a roof on the church again. Now, God will surely hear a prayer like that, right? I want to take you back to what I said early on in this message. God doesn't need your money. It's not what it's about. And so any type of gambling. And I know, some of you are very transparent, and I don't belittle you, don't put you down. I don't play the lottery. I don't think I've ever bought a lottery ticket in my life, have I? You can win and not buy a lottery ticket. We had an amazing thing happen here years. I won't get into that. Years ago, somebody won the lottery. They didn't buy the lottery ticket. Somebody bought it for them and tossed it in their lap, and it won a large amount of money. I suppose in that way it'd be all right. I'll start hanging around certain people, perhaps. Listen, this matter of idolatry needs to be, I need to direct myself before it's time to get done. If our affections are centered on things, now listen, this is so important. If our affections are centered on things, we begin to love those things. And we begin to use people instead of using things and loving people as we're called to do. And we justify it. Listen, you can do that in a legitimate sale. You can cheat someone in a sale by getting more than what you know something is worth, and you know that worth, and you should be able to tell them that, but you don't. And you justify it. I take advantage of people because I'm making a living. And so you're going to put that down on a resume? I take advantage of people. That's how I make my living? And so it's no longer about being a servant of the Lord. This is how our religion begins to come out. And as I talk about this, you can see it all over the place. It's no longer about being a servant of the Lord. It's about being a child of the King. You get the difference there? It's no longer about serving God. It's about what I can get from God. It's no longer about helping others. It's about helping ourselves to a bigger and better deal through God. It's no longer about how far God had to swoop down to rescue us. It's all about how special we are now. And it's no longer about giving up my rights to serve God. It's about getting special rights because God is there for my benefit. Do you understand what I just described to you? When that becomes a religion, then you become the God of that religion. That's the Bible's definition. This is the last point we're going to deal with, the eye of involvement. I'm giving you a way out on this one. Sometimes we see people break out of their own small group that they're in. A few times that happens, and they begin to serve God. Some really good things begin to happen in their life, and we've seen that here in our church. Don't be satisfied with mere financial support of your church. Listen to me. Don't be satisfied with mere financial involvement in our church. Give yourself to the church. Wait a minute, Brother Stayton, you said I should give myself to God. Do you know how the Bible speaks of the church? It is the body of Jesus Christ. That's it. This is the body of Jesus Christ. We are members in particular. And so giving yourself is visiting with those who are in need. Maybe somebody you know that's gone in the hospital, or maybe you're going to be a Faye Harper who visits widows that most others don't visit, and she knows a lot about them, can tell you because she goes all of the time. You could be a Barb Fain and a Bill Fain where they're up there at the family. I hate to think how much dust and how much dirt would be up there if it weren't for the two of them. Now, you can look at that and say, well, that ain't right for you to point out. Yes, it is, too. They've decided to give their lives in the service of God, and that's what they're doing. And if it's just sweeping the floor, if it's just mopping the floor, if it's just doing dishes, thank God we got people like that. You know, I could go on and on and on about those things. It's about lending help, a helping hand to someone who's in need. It's about giving yourself as looking people in the eye, and instead of just rushing by them, treating them like they're really a person and that you care. Giving yourself is investing your life in the lives of others and offering yourself to God to be used by Him. That's where it begins at. And giving yourself is not just forking out money, but it's getting involved. See, it says that the church at Corinth first gave themselves to their God. And then what followed was their pocketbook. I'm convinced that there's a lot of people that aren't doing that because they haven't given themselves to God first. Regardless of what you do or who you do it to, God is the ultimate recipient. When you give to church, you're giving to Jesus Christ. When you feed the hungry, you're feeding Jesus. When you visit the lonely, you're visiting Jesus. Ultimately, whatever we do, it's like doing it to Jesus. And if you doubt that for a moment, let me end this message with one of the most powerful scriptures that tell us about that. It's found in Matthew 25, 34 through 40, and it'll be on the screen. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. See, I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. And I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and fed you, and thirsty and gave you to drink? And when did we see you as a stranger and took you in, and naked and clothed you? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto the least of one of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. I don't know why this came to my mind. One of the toughest places there can be in the world is school. Bullying can go on in school. I'm not saying it has to, but it can. And it does quite frequently. I wonder if one of the ways you could show yourself for Jesus this week, I'll guarantee you there are kids in our school system that feels like nobody cares about them or wants them. My mind is going right now to Austin. There's a lot about that I don't know. Some of you kids are popular in school. And I hope you're not fostering your popularity by being very careful who you're going to be around. And you're willing to open your arms and invite someone where it may cause a risk for you. Because when you take them in, when you eat lunch with them, when you walk down the hall with them, when they're considered your friend, you may get cut off just like they are. I'm never prouder of our kids, and I've seen this many times, than when our kids stand up and they look at the down and the out and the ones who are rejected, and they embrace them and keep them in. That's not just for our kids in school, it's for you and for me. And that you have done it unto the least of these, you've done it to me. You sure you want to pass Jesus up? He might look considerably different than you thought he looked. Let's stand together with every head bowed and every eye closed.